What's up, guys? I'm back with another Let's Argue video. I did one of these about a month ago. I was inspired by Anthony Fantano, who does this kind of for music opinions. People send in their hot takes, their unpopular opinions, and he replies to them. And I'm doing it with fighting game stuff, so fighting games and FGC related stuff. I put a post on Twitter asking me to send in their hot takes, their unpopular opinions, and now I've collected some of my favorite ones, and we're going to go through, and I'll just say, whether I agree or disagree, and we can have a nice little discussion about it. Also, a lot of people made fun of my janky green screen setup last time. I was kind of, blurry and fading in and out of the background. We're in Ultra HD now. Just for my face, so I hope you guys enjoy the new level of quality. Hopefully it doesn't disturb you just how sharp I am now. So let's start off. We'll start reading these tweets that people sent me, and we can get things going. Okay, so first off, we've got a tweet here from @NoComi. Shoutouts to NoComi. Really great player, Evo top 8 finalist, and a very nice guy. He says, Skullgirls is probably the best fighting game released in the last 10 years. This is a spicy one, huh? I mean, for those of you who didn't know, I did play a lot of Skullgirls competitively when it first came out. I played it at Evo and stuff like that, and I did enjoy the game a lot. Best fighting game in the last 10 years, though, that's pretty high praise, considering we have stuff like, Tekken 7 came out recently, like Under Night In Birth. These games came out in the last 10 years. Like, a lot of crazy good fighting games came out in the last 10 years, but the other thing is, like, Skullgirls was the first entry in a series. It was a brand new IP made, like, by a studio. Like, it's their first game. So I think that's pretty impressive. I think for a first outing, it's, like, pretty insane how good the game is. And they definitely innovated a lot. Like, regardless of whether you like the gameplay or not, you can't argue that it, like, was really, really well thought out. There's a lot of gameplay innovations, stuff like customizable assists, stuff like selectable team size, the fact that you can have 1, 2, or 3 characters on your team. And unlike games like CVS2, where this had been tried before, it's actually like really balanced and interesting trying to select your team size. So yeah, I think they did a lot of cool stuff. If you've never played Skullgirls before, you can probably find it really cheap. I think it's on sale for like $1 a lot on Steam. So it's definitely worth checking out if you've never played it. Best game in the last 10 years, like, that's kind of a hard pill for me to swallow, but definitely a very innovative and pretty cool game, I think, overall. Next up, from @HLJford, fighting any trap character like Morrigan or Blackheart is easier than fighting characters that use mindless 50-50s. Also, zoning is way harder to be good at than any execution-heavy Rushdown character. I mean, there's a lot here. This is definitely, packed with controversy a bit, but I think that there's kind of a couple points here that I do agree with. One point being that I think people kind of conflate something being, like, frustrating for them to fight with something being really, really strong. So, a character like, I don't know, Cable or Blackheart or whatever, like a really annoying zoning character, Morgan could be another example. These are very, very frustrating to fight, and a lot of times that's what people want nerfed most, is stuff that's frustrating. Whereas, characters like Magneto, who, he doesn't frustrate you by keeping you away, he just mixes you up and kills you. Like, those tend to be, really dominant. They're really powerful, but because they're less frustrating, people remember them less as being stupid or overpowered or whatever. So I think definitely people are more willing to forgive overpowered Rushdown characters than they are overpowered keep-away characters. Like, if a keep-away character is top tier, everybody rages. But if a Rushdown character is top tier, I sleep or whatever, like that meme. So I agree with that point generally. And the point about zoning being harder to be good at than execution-heavy Rushdown characters, that's another thing that, like, I think people conflate execution skill with sort of gameplay skill. Like, sometimes being a zoner is execution heavy. Like, it's not easy to do Morrigan, like, fast fly and, like, refly fireball stuff. Like, it takes a toll on you execution wise. But players like Chris G, the way he plays Morrigan just really shows an extra level of gameplay knowledge and, like, skill that 99.99% of players don't have. Like, so if you see someone just doing a long combo that's really hard to do, that they grind it out in training mode a long time, that takes skill in a sense, but that's a very different type of skill than the type it takes to always be making the correct choices like Chris G's doing, blocking absolutely everything the opponent does to you, like having insane defense and reads. Those are very different skills as well. So overall, this is a spicy tweet, but there's definitely a couple things in here that I would say I agree with sort of the sentiment. So yeah. All right, here we got one from Dato Doya. Shoutouts to Dato Doya, my fellow Krillin partner in crime here. Allowing for 2 control schemes to be chosen as a way to let casuals have fun in a fighting game, i.e. the technical and stylish modes in Guilty Gear, creates a situation where even if a new player decides that they enjoy the game enough to want to learn it, they want to start again plus have bad habits. So I would say I like semi-disagree with this. Generally, I'm in favor of sort of like fun or easy modes in fighting games, like easy execution modes. If they're done well, sometimes they're done really badly and they like don't, actually give you the experience of playing the game. But if they're done well, I think it can be really good because generally, like, I think something that people underestimate is the reason why people like give up on fighting games, like the reason why people play a fighting game for like an hour and never touch it again. It's not usually that it's hard. Usually they're not just like, okay, this is hard, and then they stop playing forever. It's usually just because they're not having enough fun for them to justify continuing to play. And a lot of times the reason they're not having fun is because, they're trying to do stuff on the controller and they're not really seeing it translate into like cool things that the character is doing that gives them that cool like feedback response of like, okay, I'm trying to do something, the character's doing it, and it feels awesome. So I feel like sort of easy input modes are a good way to shortcut that experience. You don't have to learn how to do a DP motion or whatever. You don't have to learn how to do double quarter circle forward to do a super. And games like MK11, or also I think like Soul Calibur and to a lesser extent Tekken, are great examples of this. These are games where casuals can basically just press buttons and it looks awesome. Like, they can feel like they're taking advantage of their character without having to open up a move list, without having to learn how to do different inputs. So those games actually tend to sell better than games like Street Fighter, or especially like the Marvel vs. Capcom series. Whenever I've tried to like get my friends who don't play fighting games to play Marvel vs. Capcom, they just hate it. It's just a very unfun experience for them just because they can't do anything. But if I show them like Injustice 2 or whatever, they love it because, there's one button supers, like just stringing together different normals makes like cool and interesting attacks happen. So yeah, in general, I'm a fan of easy input modes for, just making the game instantly fun for people if they don't know how to play fighting games. And as for the thing of like starting again and having bad habits, I definitely think that bad habits is like one of the biggest like bugbears in fighting games. I think bad habits is a much smaller deal than people make it out to be. Like, you will always have bad habits. No matter what you do, no matter how vigilant you are to play, the right way or whatever, you will have bad habits. And a big part of getting good is replacing your bad habits with correct habits. So I think, like, just because you have certain habits that were given to you by playing with easy mode at first, I don't think it's going to be a long-term problem. I think the bigger problem is just like, how can we make it so people are having so much fun with the game that they can't stop playing? How are we going to make this experience so rewarding for them that they don't want to put the game down and they just want to keep playing and getting better? I think that is the challenge that fighting games need to conquer, not the challenge of like, how can we teach people to play the right way so they don't have to relearn things? I don't think that matters as much. Just make sure they're having fun and then they will put forth the effort. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the subject. All right, next up, we got a Dragon Ball FighterZ one here. Bandai/Arc System Works nerfing double level ones is the worst thing that they could have done to Dragon Ball FighterZ. So I mean, the wording here is a little hyperbolic. I think there's definitely worse things that they could have done. They could have like, removed interesting combos from the game. They could have like doubled the amount of blue life that every attack generates. They could have buffed raw tag. There's definitely worse things they could have done. But I do think that the double level one nerf was kind of a bad change. And I think most people would agree. I don't necessarily know how hot this take is because I think a lot of people would agree with it. Oh, here we go. This is a lot better. Bandai nerfing double super was a good thing. Now that's a hot take. I don't think many people agree with that, to be honest. I think it was mostly intended as like a Bardock nerf. But the problem is, like, if you make a change to nerf one character and that change nerfs a lot of other characters, you're making a lot more people mad because of the nerfs to other characters than you are making people happy because of the nerfs to, like, the original character that it was targeted at. So, like, Super Saiyan Goku mains, like, Beerus mains, all these people, even Krillin mains, like Krillin, and he could do double supers, Frieza, Zamasu, like, with proper setups, you know, they nerfed a lot of characters. And it also removes sort of interesting combo routes from the game. In a game that's kind of starved for good combo routes, the character balance patch improved it a little bit. The combos are definitely more distinct now across characters, but generally, like, too many characters are doing the same combo, I think. At high levels, the combos should be really different across characters, and removing double supers removed a degree of that a little bit. So, didn't like the double super nerf. But it is what it is. I guess we have to live with it now, and then maybe someday they'll revert it. But I do like the more recent combo routes that they've introduced with the latest patch. I think that's a step in the right direction. But, you know, like, I don't think the double super nerf needed to happen. I think it kind of caused more problems than it solved. All right, from @JasonStew2, 2D fighting games with sprites will always be better than 2.5D fighters. So I guess by 2.5D, he's talking about, like, Street Fighter 4 and 5, you know, he's talking about Marvel vs. Capcom 3. This one, I don't necessarily agree with, like, always be better. That's kind of a very, like, close-minded way to put it, I think. And if you look at games like Guilty Gear Xrd and Dragon Ball FighterZ, like, what they're doing with 3D art on, like, a 2D plane is really insane. Like, those games look absolutely incredible, and in my opinion, they kind of rival the appearance of some of the all-time best sprite-based fighting games. But that being said, I think your average sprite-based game looks better than your average 3D model, like, 2D plane game. So I do love the look of old Street Fighter. The look of, like, KOF 13 versus KOF 14 is kind of night and day. I think 13 looks a billion times better. So yeah, I definitely do miss the sprite-based age. I think those games are beautiful, but I kind of understand why they're moving away from it. Sprites are very, very expensive to produce. It requires a lot of skill, and it's skill that is becoming less common. There's a lot less skilled sprite animators these days than there are skilled 3D animators. So I understand why the industry is kind of moving away from that, but I definitely do miss it. I think they look beautiful, and I think that they communicate information in a fighting game very efficiently. Like, a single sprite can tell you a lot, and sometimes it's harder to do that with a 3D model because they're just, you know, shaping the animation of the model as opposed to drawing a brand new sprite from scratch to communicate a particular piece of information during an attack. So yeah, I miss the sprite-based days, but I think there's definitely possibility for 2.5D games to look amazing. A lot of amazing looking ones are coming out, so I think the potential is there for the future. But I would love to see some variety. I don't want every single fighting game to have 3D models. Give us one or two with 2D sprites, and I think that would be awesome so that we can have some variety. All right, from @JosephHallowell, just play a top tier. I do it, so the only thing to improve is myself. So I guess I'll give this like a half agree. I think generally the most important thing when picking a character is to play a character that you enjoy playing. I think by far that's the number one thing. Play someone you enjoy playing and you'll like the game more, you'll play the game more, and you'll be better because you care more about playing when you're playing a character that you enjoy playing. But that being said, there are a lot of people where the goal is not just to have fun. The goal is to get those W's. Like, if you're just kind of a casual playing online, you might be satisfied with like a 50 to 60% win rate online. But for a lot of players, that's not going to be good enough. For a lot of players, they're wanting to reach the high ranks. They're wanting to go to tournaments and actually have a shot at winning. And in that case, I think you may as well just pick a top tier. I think Sanford Kelly said it best.
Just pick a top tier.
So definitely, like, if you're going to tournaments, I think it's totally fine to pick low tiers, but I think if you're the type of person where, you know, you're playing a low tier and you're just complaining the whole time about how your character sucks and the developer needs to buff your character and you're miserable because you're playing this character that's low tier, just pick a top tier, man. You're going to like your life a lot more. If playing a low tier is damaging your, you know, psyche and it's making you feel bad, just drop the character. I know it sucks having to drop your main and relearn a new character, but, like, just do it. You'll feel a lot better if you're struggling with the game because you're playing a low tier. But yeah, so I don't think that everyone should pick a top tier. I think if you're just in it to have fun, like I go to tournaments, but I'm mostly just there to have fun and to make fun content for you guys to watch. And I think it's a lot more entertaining for you and for me if I play the characters that I like rather than just being the billionth guy playing Bardock. So yeah. From @KingstonSky, we've got Tekken is the least fun and appealing to newcomers. Compared to other fighting games, it feels clunky and it's also uninteresting to watch. Oh, this one hurts my heart. And I think the real reason that this hurts is because I can see sort of the grains of truth within this tweet. Now, obviously, I think Tekken is an amazing series, and I think Tekken 7 might be the best ever Tekken game, and I think it's one of the best fighting games that you can play right now, by far. But in terms of being appealing to newcomers, the series does have a big problem, I think. And I think most of it comes down to the fact that with Tekken, their philosophy is not like when a new game is coming, they throw out the old and they kind of redo everything. Like if you look at Street Fighter, a lot of times like all the systems are new, the combo systems are all new. All the stuff you did in the last game is mostly not going to work when a new game comes out. But Tekken is completely the opposite. They just keep everything in. The core stuff that you were doing 10 years ago, 12, 15 years ago in Tekken still works in Tekken 7. So that legacy sort of design, I think, makes the game pretty hard for newcomers to get into. I also think the game has an issue with readability. Like, if you look at Street Fighter, it's very easy to tell what's going on, even if you're someone who doesn't play the game. You can tell, like, okay, he threw a fireball and he jumped over it, you know what I mean? Or, like, he jumped up in the air and he hit him with an uppercut to anti-air him. Like, you can see that. But Tekken, it's very, very hard to understand what's going through the players' minds when you don't know the game very well. Even if you do know the game very well, it can be hard to parse what's happening at high levels. So I think Tekken has generally had sort of a spectatability problem. I don't think that's a word, but Tekken has not been a very fun game to spectate for a lot of people. I do think Tekken 7 was a big step in the right direction. They introduced a lot of stuff like rage drives and like the slow-mo system when there's like really close to a kill with both characters low on life. And a lot of the new characters play in a very different way from what we've seen in Tekken, which I think could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on who you ask. But certainly, from a visual perspective, they provide quite the spectacle. Characters like Akuma and Negan and Geese Howard, like, definitely I think Tekken 7 is a lot more fun to watch than other Tekken games. I think if you've got burned in the past by like just looking at Tekken and thinking this looks boring, this doesn't look like a game I would enjoy, you really, really owe it to yourself to try the game, or at least to try watching a big tournament for the game, watch the top 8. And I think you'll be surprised by how much fun it is once you kind of give it a chance and actually sit down and try to engage with it. So big Tekken fan, but I kind of see a little bit where this tweet is coming from, even though I don't completely agree with it. Okay, from @AshersOnFire. If fighting games had better tutorial and training modes, they'd be more popular. For example, Unist's mission and tutorial modes teach you some of the combos and explain things the characters can do well. That made me more interested, but I've only done fighters combo missions for Zenny. So I do think that a good tutorial is pretty important. I think fighters and Tekken especially. Tekken has no tutorial. It's terrible. Tekken 7. But fighters also, the tutorial I think is pretty weak. So I do think a good tutorial is pretty good. But I think definitely people who already know how to play fighting games put way too much of an emphasis on a tutorial. And they neglect to think of the fact that a lot of players just aren't going to try it. Kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about the most important thing for player retention is just for the game to be fun. Like a lot of people, when they boot up the game, they don't instantly open up the tutorial and then go, okay, let me learn all this stuff and get through the whole thing, and then I'll decide if I want to play the game. No, they jump into arcade mode, they play a couple rounds, and then they've already decided in their head whether they're having fun or not and whether they're going to give the game a chance or not. So I think definitely like tutorials are good for taking people who already know they want to play the game and taking them to the next level of being able to compete online and being able to feel the improvement that makes fighting games so rewarding, that feeling of learning new things, applying it in games and taking it to the next level. I think tutorials are good for that, but for the level of people below that, where they haven't even committed to whether they're actually going to play the game or whether they're just going to play through story mode once and then never touch it again, which I'm sure a lot of people playing like Mortal Kombat or Injustice or Soul Calibur, that's what they're doing. They buy the game, they play story mode, and then they never touch the game again. And tutorials are not going to help convert those people. So yeah, like I think tutorials are good to have. Every fighting game should have a good tutorial. But I think people put too much of an emphasis on it. And I think a lot of times, like, when you see these tweets that are like, you know, Eunice tutorial is amazing, or Skullgirls tutorial is amazing, or Guilty Gear, or whatever, the people who are really like talking about how good these tutorials are experienced fighting game players. A lot of it is kind of like patting themselves on the back. I know I'm getting into hot take territory here, but a lot of it is like people sort of being self-congratulatory about how the game that they play has a great tutorial in it. Even though I do think that those tutorials are generally good, they are still kind of turn-offs to players. Like Eunice tutorial, I think is pretty good, but it's also just like a wall of text. It is not that good for new players to just have to read a wall of text and then parse it. Like, that is not an engaging way to get people to have fun with your game. So while I do think that if you're already sort of someone like me, when I was picking up Eunice, I knew I was going to take it fairly seriously. I knew I was going to try to learn combos, try to play online and stuff like that. So I knew that I was going to have to engage with the tutorial, and I did, and it was pretty good. But for people who are just trying out the game and they want to have a good time, stuff like that is not good for converting them into hardcore players. So hopefully I'm not being too harsh here, but that's just kind of how I feel about it. So yeah, anyway, I do think that every fighting game needs a good tutorial. But I think maybe sometimes we put too much of an emphasis on that and not enough emphasis on how are we going to make the new player experience when they first pick up the game fun and engaging. So yeah, I guess that's all I have to say on this subject. I guess I've been ranting a while. So let's go to the next one. From @Chell Earhart. Games opting for less complex special move execution while still maintaining deep technical and interesting systems. So Fighters, Smash, and the new Power Rangers game is the future, and I'm very excited for it. There is no reason to put a Shoryuken motion and a full 360 in a game anymore. I would say I mostly agree with this. Skullgirls is actually like the first example I can think of. I remember the design philosophy when they were making Skullgirls was that there's going to be no special moves harder than a Dragon Punch motion. So no half circles, no 720s, no double quarter circle forwards, no forward, half circle forward, no pretzel motions, none of that. Only quarter circles and DPs, basically. And I think even DPs are like a little too much. Like, new players tend to struggle with DP inputs, and I think a game like Fighters has kind of proven they're not necessary. You can give someone a full moveset without having to use DP motions, especially if it's a game like Skullgirls where you have separate punch and kick buttons. So yeah, I think that sort of easy special move inputs are a good thing. I think games like Power Rangers or like Rising Thunder was one that they did a beta for a while ago, and I'm pretty sure the game's never coming back. But Rising Thunder was a game with one-button specials, and I think it was done pretty well. And obviously, Super Smash Brothers, like, whether you consider it a fighting game or not, Super Smash Brothers is the most popular fighting game right now in terms of sales. And a lot of it is because, I've been talking about this a lot this video, but you instantly pick the game up and have fun. There's absolutely no barriers to you having fun because you can instantly do everything the character has available to them. So I think more fighting games need to consider that. I don't think that necessarily all fighting games need to have one-button specials or whatever. That might be taking a little bit too far. But I think Dragon Ball FighterZ is a pretty good compromise where everything is a quarter circle forward input. So if you know how to do a fireball, you can do every move in the game. So I think that that's a sort of great way to go about it. And I think that these games are generally easier for beginners to have fun with. So I know a lot of people have told me that Fighters is their first fighting game, or Fighters is the first game that even made them consider playing fighting games in the first place. And I think part of that is because there is such a low barrier to having access to all of your character's tools. So yeah, I think it's a pretty good thing, and I hope to see more games take this route in the future. From @SmugOjusama. Netplay should be respected more. Offline will always be better, but not everyone has access to an offline scene, and it can feel disheartening to hear people write off your experience because it's derived from Netplay. I agree with this one a lot, I think. I think definitely in like sort of the 09er era, like when Street Fighter 4 was fairly new, Netplay was just crapped on. Everyone was like, Only people playing online are scrubs. You'll never get good from playing online. You have to go to locals if you want to get good, and if you don't have a local scene, you're SOL. But I think that those people have been proven wrong time and time again. Lots of good players have come kind of from being online warriors, like Smug, like Punk, like a lot of people who started primarily playing the game online in sort of that post '09 era when every fighting game has online now. A lot of those people have started going to tournaments and just being killers. And I do think, like you said, that offline is better. I think you learn a lot more playing offline because you tend to have a lot more long sets. You tend to more reliably be able to play really, really good players that are going to challenge you if you go to tournaments. And you're going to be able to talk to the guy next to you a lot more easily and discuss, ways to improve and stuff like that. Find your flaws a little bit easier. I do think offline is better, but I think you can become a good player by playing online, for sure. And I think anyone who tells you that online is not like real, you'll never be able to, do well if all you do is play online. Those people are wrong, for sure. Online, I think, can teach you some bad habits, but it can also, teach you how to be good. There are good people online, and to get good, you have to play against good people. So it's definitely possible, and we've seen evidence of that a lot. So yeah, I fully agree with this tweet. At real Mr. Mixtape says Marvel vs. Capcom 1 has the best soundtrack of any Capcom fighter. Okay, I will say MVC 1 has a great soundtrack for sure. Really, really good. It's definitely up there, but as long as Street Fighter 3 Third Strike exists, I cannot say that MVC 1 has the best soundtrack of a fighter. Maybe it has the best soundtrack of any Marvel vs. game, any MVC game. It might have the best soundtrack out of those. As much as I love the MVC2 soundtrack with its weird sort of kitschy jazz, I do love that, but MVC1 soundtrack's really good, and it's very, very faithful to the properties that the characters come from. So it's a great soundtrack, maybe not the best in my opinion. From at KitFlixSSB, the update where they added Videl and Jiren was the worst update they've ever done. And he's saying, like, not the DLC themselves, but the patch that they did to the game. I think a lot of people weren't happy with that patch. Like we discussed earlier, I definitely didn't like the double super nerf. I think that nerf was completely unnecessary. But the other stuff in that patch, I generally don't hate. The guard cancel nerf, I don't hate at all. In fact, I think in some situations the guard... Did I say nerf? The guard cancel buff. I think the guard cancel buff is maybe pretty good. We needed more defensive options, and that's a good defensive option for sure. Also, the blue life nerf, I like that a lot too. You build a lot more blue life, or a lot less blue life when you're being hit now. So I think those are good changes. The meter build nerf as well. I kind of like the meter build nerf after you use a level 1. Build less meter, makes you think a lot more when you're going to use meter. So anyway, generally, I was okay with those changes. I definitely don't hate the patch like a lot of people do, but I don't universally think it was an amazing patch. But I definitely don't like their route of nerfing mix-ups. I think that's kind of the biggest problem I've had with their patching strategy, is they just seem to want to remove all semblance of unreactable mix-ups from the game. And I don't really agree with that, because I think that's one of the reasons why the game can feel kind of slow, and tournament matches for the game can last a really, really long time, because it's really hard for the players to open each other up because they don't have that good of mix-ups access to. So, yeah, I don't hate that patch, but I didn't, like, universally love it. There were some parts of it I really didn't like. But overall, I didn't think it was that bad. But this last patch that we got, the character balance one, I actually love that patch. I think that's probably the best patch that we've ever gotten for the game. So I'm pretty excited for all the changes to the characters and all the new stuff that they introduced with that. I think that was actually a really fun patch, because they didn't remove options for the most part. They just added a bunch of new ones. So that's what I like to see from the game. Don't take away our tools, just give us new ones. So I like the most recent patch a lot. From at BlackAmar64, too many people make excuses to not try different games. My favorite is, isn't that game dead, when they haven't looked into finding the online communities and or tournaments that exist for said game. Oh my god. I saved this one for last because I agree with this one so hard. Oh my god. People just do not want to try new fighting games, and I kind of understand, like, it's a big big investment to get good at a fighting game, and like just to learn it is a big investment. So I understand why if someone's like, dude, you gotta play KI or whatever, like people will try to let them down gently and be like, like I don't know, I'm not really, it doesn't seem like my kind of thing or whatever. And I'm guilty of this too. Like there are lots of good fighting games that I just never gave a chance, either because visually they didn't interest me, or like from what I'd seen of the gameplay, it didn't look that interesting, or just that I was playing too many fighting games at the time and didn't have room for more. So I'm guilty of this as well. But yeah, I think people definitely like, they're too quick to sort of take their impression from the game from like seeing it one time on a stream or whatever and just go, okay, this game's not for me, I'm never gonna play it, blah blah blah. Even though so many people are telling them it's a great game, they're just like, nah, never gonna play it. And I talked about Skullgirls earlier, but that was like such a pain for me when I was playing that game. I was like, you guys have to try Skullgirls. It's fun and the online is really good. And people are like, isn't that game dead? No one plays that game or whatever. So it's definitely frustrating, and it makes it hard to, get people to try out games that you really like. But I think in some ways this is getting better. And I think that Under Night in Birth being at EVO is kind of a good example of how, like, if you just have a passionate community and you like go out of your way to introduce people to the game, sell them on the game, and do your hardest to show up to tournaments and run tournaments and stuff like that, you can make a huge difference. You can get games at EVO just by having like huge fan support. So I think that that's like a really positive thing that happened. I'm so excited for Eunice at EVO. I would not have picked up the game if it hadn't come to EVO, to be honest. That was kind of the spark that I needed to give the game a shot, was hearing that it was going to be an EVO game. But now that I've picked it up, I really don't regret it. I love the game a lot, and it makes me think, like, how many of these great games have I just been ignoring all this time just because, like, I didn't want to put in the work to learn the game. So, yeah, I think fighting game fans could definitely be more open to games that they don't play, more open to trying them out and stuff like that. That's something I would like to see in the future, is people being more willing to give new games a shot, so that it's not just, Street Fighter and Tekken and MK and, the same series over and over just because that's what people are comfortable with. Like, I want to see some new series get some recognition. So that would be something cool to see in the future. So yeah, this was definitely probably my favorite hot take. I agree with it very strongly. But anyway, that's going to be it. I think we are out of hot takes here. Let me know down in the comments, what do you guys think? Are there any of these tweets that you had a very different feeling than I had by reading them? Be sure to let me know. I'm thinking I might make this a monthly feature. I did the last one a month ago. So maybe next month I will do another one of these. So keep an eye out on my Twitter. I'm at Crofts on Twitter, Crofts. So follow me on there, and then maybe for the next one of these, you can get your opinion heard, and I'll respond to that. So as always, thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one.